Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak here this evening. My name is Patricia Heavey, and I am a lecturer at the Technological University of the Shannon, and I'm also a researcher in the Sport, Health and Exercise group here at TUS as well. So I'm going to speak to you a little bit about menopause and the role of diet and nutrition. To start off, a little bit of background about menopause. Menopause, I suppose, is a transition. It can start in a woman's 40s and go right through up until the late 50s. And during that time, that's referred to as the menopausal transition. And up until menopause, a woman is going through perimenopause. And then the day that she has had her last period and has not had a period in 12 months, that is known as menopause. And then anything beyond that is postmenopause. So you can't actually confirm somebody has gone through the menopause until a year after they've had no period. So it can be a long process for some women, others it's quicker. And the average age for menopause is about 51 years, with about 4 years of irregular periods leading up to the event. And because women are living so much longer, up to the age of 80 years, on average, around a third of our lives are post-menopause. So it's important that, this time is looked after and women are supported during this, so that they can maintain optimum health and well-being. It's important, though, to realize that during menopause, women do go through a range of different symptoms and a range of different severity of symptoms. So women do experience very unique and individual journeys going through menopause. And for others, some it can be quite severe, and for others it can be mild, or they don't actually are aware of any symptoms. So it's a very different experience for everyone. And some of the symptoms that women can experience during menopause are listed here. And most of these are, especially when it comes to the vasomotor symptoms, this is due primarily to changes in hormones. And the big hormone that's changing during this time is estrogen. Estrogen levels in our 40s tends to fluctuate, it goes up and down. And then once you get into the latter stages, getting closer to menopause, and then during menopause and beyond postmenopause, estrogen levels start to rapidly decline. Some of the symptoms can be vasomotor symptoms, so those typical ones that people associate with the menopause, like hot flushes and night sweats. Some women even feel this sort of crawling sensation under the skin known as formication. You can then have neuromuscular symptoms like muscle pain, joint pains, headaches, urogenital symptoms, psychological symptoms, and also other symptoms that women report at this time, such as weight change, body shape changes, etc. Some of these may be due to hormonal changes, and others can be due to other things that are happening as we age, or things that are going on in our lives at that time. And actually, we know very little about what women experience during the menopause in Ireland. So earlier this year, we did conduct a survey to find out more about the menopausal experiences and health behaviours of women in Ireland. So we completed an online survey, and 855 women responded. They came from all different stages of the menopause, such as perimenopause, early and late. 41% were from postmenopause and they had symptoms, and 16% were postmenopause without symptoms. What was interesting, though, was that such a huge percentage of women were indicating that the menopausal symptoms that they were experiencing interfered with their daily activities. So up on 78% of respondents indicated that menopausal symptoms interfered sometimes or often in their daily activities. And when we asked women, especially those that had gone through menopause and were symptomatic, 59% of those women experienced 13 or more symptoms, similar to the symptoms that was listed in the slide before. So a lot of women were experiencing a lot of symptoms, but the most commonly reported symptoms were hot flushes that affected 92% of women, low sex drive affecting 89% of women, and night sweats affecting 87% of women. when we asked women about their use of HRT, about 31% were using HRT. And those women that were not using HRT, when we asked them why not, they said it was something that they didn't consider, or that they just didn't think it was something that was going to be suitable for them. But lots of women did look for alternative therapies, and about 38% of women were using herbal remedies such as black cohosh and other popular herbal remedies. So this was just a really interesting insight, because we really did not know what was happening with women in Ireland. So this kind of gave us a little bit of insight around that. We were also very interested, trying to understand maybe a little bit more about weight and weight changes at this time, because it is something that a lot of women report. And the majority of women, 80% of women, reported weight changes during the menopause. And when we asked them about their height and weight and worked out their weight classification, 66% of women were overweight or obese. And you know, almost 50% of women reported finding it really difficult to manage that weight. So that was, again, really interesting at this time, and it indicates that we do need to support women through this time period. But what was really lovely to see was that so many women were still engaging with physical activity, and the most popular activity was walking. What we did find, though, when we asked women about getting, you know, being prepared for menopause, 77% of women said that they felt they lacked knowledge around menopause. They didn't understand what was going on during this time. They didn't know what was happening to them, and they didn't know what to do or what was available to them, and they were unprepared for menopause. That's a high percentage there. And when we asked women, like, where did they get their information from around menopause, the majority, 53%, said that they got that information from social media, and only 21% of women you even talk to their GPs about their menopause journey. When we asked women, did they talk to other women or family members around about their menopause journey, they actually, so only about 10% of women did that. So this really highlighted that for a lot of women, this seems like it's quite a solitary experience. And we do know, to get through these sorts of journeys, it's really useful and important to have that support network and people that you can talk to. So again, this was something that we found that could be looked at in the future to try to support women during the menopause. And as I mentioned before, the big change with the hormones is to do with estrogen. There's lots of other hormones changing at this time, but estrogen is the one that we kind of associate the most. And during the perimenopause, estrogen levels are fluctuating, and women report things like mood swings, irritability, weight gain, night sweats. And then as they start to go into menopause, and then when the menstrual period stops, estrogen levels are starting to decline, and women will experience maybe more severe symptoms like hot flashes and night sweats. And post-menopause, that estrogen level is still declining, and some women will still experience some symptoms, but on top of that, now women are at increased risk of things like osteoporosis and heart disease, because prior to the menopause, estrogen actually protects you against these sorts of diseases. But once those estrogen levels start to decline, that protection is no longer there. So it's really important for women at that time and before that to prepare and look to diet and lifestyle and other aids to try to hold off any of those sorts of changes. So when we look at menopause and health, there's lots of things going on, and a lot of those health issues that women can experience at this time are, of course, going to be related to those changes and fluctuations in hormones. But it's really important to also recognize that for a lot of women, there's a lot going on at this time in their lives. Children can be leaving home, they can be still looking after children, they may now also be caring for parents and relatives, there could be changes at work. So these can all lead to impacts on your health and well-being. And also for a lot of women, their bodies start to change. They may start to put on weight, or they may put on weight around the middle, and they may start to just feel differently about their bodies. So it's coming to terms with all of that can be quite a challenge for some women. But on the flip side, we do see for a lot of women at this time, they start to look at their bodies differently in terms of how great it has been and what wonderful work it's done for them. And, you know, know, and they start to appreciate the work that their bodies have done. And you know, it's all about now maybe looking after that and making sure that their health is their top priority. So lots going on and lots to be aware of. And the one thing we do find is that women do talk a lot about the time of menopause and that whole journey where the weight change will start to occur, and weight gains will start to occur, and maybe they will also see additional body shape changes. And many women do report weight gain during this time. But when we look at the research around this, it doesn't seem like that the menopause per se is a cause of weight gain. Aging is definitely a cause for it. It's definitely a time that's associated with weight gain, and that occurs in both sexes. So both men and women will put on weight as they age, and they start to lose muscle mass. And this is due to the aging process, but also due to the fact that for a lot of people, they start to maybe exercise less or less intensely, and they may start to change their dietary habits. So for both, weight change can occur around this time. But what we do know that's unique to menopause is that where that weight goes is seemingly tied up with your hormones. So estrogen would normally have maybe put that when you were carrying any weight, that for a lot of women that weight would have been, say, in a pear shape here. Estrogen would have really directed a lot of body fat around the hips and the bum and that sort of region, whereas as the estrogen levels start to decline, the weight now starts to go more around the middle of the body and the upper half of the body. So that's something to be aware of, is that the weight, where the weight goes, could be in a different place. So muscle weight loss is also something that can happen. This is due to probably the aging process, and a lot of that, of course, will be due to maybe changes in exercise and diet. But on the flip side, some women can, of course, you know, lose weight unintentionally, and that's something also to be aware of, because it's not a time you want to be losing a lot of weight unintentionally, because weight can actually be protective against certain things like osteoporosis. So things like fatigue, depression, and anxiety can lead to weight loss for some. So again, to be aware of that. So looking at weight management during this time, one of the big things is to try to ensure that we eat protein at every meal. For a lot of us in Ireland, we are eating enough protein, but for a lot of us, we condense that maybe into one meal. And eating protein at every meal seems to be better for maintaining muscle and also for keeping us fuller for longer. So try to incorporate protein at your breakfast, lunch, and your dinner, and maybe even in some of your snacks. And it just will work more efficiently at that because of that. Fiber-rich foods are really important, and we'll also see other benefits of fiber-rich foods. They also keep us feeling fuller for longer, and incorporating plenty of fruit and vegetables. And I suppose to be very mindful now of eating, you know, it can be a time where we are eating out of habit or because of an emotional response. We might, you know, start snacking mindlessly and things like that. And it's starting to maybe pull back and ask yourself, well, why am I eating this food, or am I really hungry? And to just maybe think about what we're eating and why. And then, you know, if you are saying to yourself, actually, I'm not hungry, I'm just eating this because, you know, it's something that I always have done at 10 o'clock. I always have a bar of chocolate and it's just a habit. Then you learn how to break that habit by distracting yourself or doing something different. And if it's something like emotions, like you're eating because you're upset or for some other reason, we'll maybe look at some other support system that you could replace the eating with. So it does take time, and it probably needs a bit more support to actually think those things through. But mindful eating is really important and can be very beneficial for a lot of women. And regular exercise, of course, has to be part of all of this. It's going to really help with maintaining muscle mass, and it just is good for overall well-being as well. This is a time when, like I said, you know, we're at increased risk of things like osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is a term that's described for brittle bones, and it's something that we are all at increased risk of, especially as we age. And this is down to things like your genetics, but for a lot of women, estrogen, and those declines in estrogen puts us at greater risk, because estrogen actually was protective against osteoporosis before menopause. And as those levels start to go down, we find ourselves more at risk. And other things that increase your risk of developing osteoporosis are large alcohol consumption, smoking as well, and maybe say lack of exercise. So it's important to maybe try to counteract all of those effects, and if you are smoking, to give up, and look to give up, and if and to make sure your alcohol intake is within the guidelines. But weight bearing exercise is really important, and this is any exercise where there's actually pressure being put on the body. So things like, say, really brisk walking, where there's where you're actually pounding the streets as such, or running, or something along those lines. It's really good for bone health. So weight bearing exercise is very important. Calcium and vitamin D intake also important, as long together with protein, and again to try to have that protein throughout the day so it can work more efficiently. And of course, talk to your doctor if you have any questions or concerns around osteoporosis. Another thing to be aware of at this time is heart health. And again, estrogen was doing a great job of protecting women from heart disease before the menopause. And again, as estrogen levels go down, women's risk of heart disease now becomes the same as a man. And again, it's important to consider what you need to do to maybe try to maintain heart health. We often find that, for a lot of women, if you measure their cholesterol in their 30s and even into their 40s, that, that the cholesterol levels are relatively good. But then as they're going through menopause stages, the cholesterol levels can start to go up, and go up even more so, especially when you're postmenopausal. And that's because those protective effects of estrogen are no longer there. So what can we do? Well, some of the things that we know with regards to lifestyle that can help with looking after our heart health is eating things like a Mediterranean style diet. So lots of starchy foods, fruit and vegetables, and again, including fish in your diet. So there's lots of things in those foods that can protect our hearts. For example, in fruit and veg, we have loads of potassium, and potassium can help maintain normal blood pressure. When you look at oily fish, it can contain omega-3s, and that can be really protective for heart health as well. Eating less saturated fats, such as lots of too much red meat or processed meat, and say full fat dairy can also maybe increase your cholesterol levels. So watch those sorts of things as well, and to try to choose plants and products that are made from vegetable and plant oils, such as olive oil. And if you're consuming alcohol, moderate intakes, and preferably with meals. And these again can all play a significant role in protecting your heart health. I'm also just going to touch on menopause and mood, because this is again something that affects a lot of women, and a lot of women can go through a really rough time during menopause and not realize that a lot of these changes can be due to the menopause, and not necessarily actually having issues with regards to their mood and stuff can be affected by hormonal changes. So things like, again, coming back to our estrogen can affect the brain, and also these neurotransmitters that are in the brain. And neurotransmitters are these chemical messengers in the brain. They send messages throughout the body. So estrogen plays a role in all of that, and estrogen is also linked to serotonin production. And serotonin is also known as the happy hormone, and estrogen is involved in producing that. During the time of menopause, lots of women do report symptoms like mood swings, anxiety, insomnia, and difficulty with memory and concentration. Now, there's a lot of things at play here. Of course, there's these hormonal changes. There's also a lot of life changes going on at this time. So there's lots of things happening. So it's important to get to the bottom of it and talk to your GP if you're concerned. But again, maybe diet could be beneficial for some women. So what can we do? Well, again, we're coming back to those whole foods and looking at, first of all, protein. And so protein, again, as we've seen, it's really important in lots of different things with regards to our health, but it's also really important in making serotonin, this happy hormone. And it's also used to make other neurotransmitters, those brain chemical messengers. So protein is important to make those different neurotransmitters. And the reason why is because within some proteins, we have what's called tryptophan. It's just an amino acid or a component of certain protein foods. And that tryptophan can be used then to make all of these neurotransmitters and serotonin. So look at some of the foods there that are rich in tryptophan, things like chicken, beef, pork, fish, seafood, tofu, but also things like oats and bananas, and as well as your dairy products. So in a wide variety of foods, but here again, trying to eat those foods throughout the day as opposed to just concentrated in, say, one meal. So trying to balance that throughout the day at all the different meals. And these neurotransmitters, they're actually, the majority of them are actually made in our gut. So the bacteria that lives in our large intestine, they're the guys that actually make these neurotransmitters. And then they travel up to the brain via the vagus nerve. So 90% of these neurotransmitters and serotonin are made in our gut. And why is this important? Well, this is really important because those microbes and bacteria that are living in our gut that make these hormones, these neurotransmitters, they actually use starchy or complex carbohydrates and fiber as a food source. So all of this good bacteria in our gut, they like to use complex carbohydrates and fiber, and that helps them to grow and reproduce. And they then can make all of these neurotransmitters and the serotonin. So to do that, it's really important to have a diet that's rich in plant foods, such as fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, and seeds. So you can see how both protein and carbohydrates, but these kind of these nutrient dense foods are really, really important for our overall health and well-being. Also at this time, for a lot of women, it can be a time of a lot of sleep disturbances. This is Penny, a pup who arrived into our house a couple of weeks ago, who has absolutely no problem sleeping. But for some women, sleep can be an issue. And again, this is related back to all these changes in hormone levels. So these decreases in estrogen can lead to those things like hot flushes and night sweats. So that's going to disturb sleep and have you waking up, and then the sleep patterns are broken. And also at this time, women can have restless leg syndrome, where they have the strong urge to move their legs, and it's really very frustrating, hard to get to sleep. And then because of the hormonal changes, we can see urogenital changes, including needing to go to the bathroom more often. So again, breaking the cycle of sleep, and that's going to have an impact. And on top of that, you can experience more anxiety at this time, making sleep harder. And then this becomes a vicious cycle. The tiredness can exacerbate mood and anxiety, and this just leads to a continuous cycle. Now, in the short term, if these are just random nights of poor sleep, your body will, of course, bounce back, and there'll be no issues. Your body is well able to accommodate this. But if this is something that's happening over the long term, and there are long-term sleep issues, it can potentially have a negative effect on health, such as blood pressure and heart disease. So it's really important to maybe think about ways to improve your sleep. The flip side as well, of course, is that if you are tired and that's affecting your mood and anxiety, that can then in turn have a negative effect on appetite, and that makes us more drawn to calorie-rich foods and therefore affect weight management. So what can we do? Well, serotonin, which we've chatted about a good bit, is also important for sleep, and we know some of the foods that are rich in tryptophan that can help us make serotonin. But serotonin is needed in this case for the production of another hormone called melatonin, and melatonin controls our sleep-wake cycle. cycle. So again, there's certain foods that may be helpful for some people. So let's look at some of the foods again that could be useful with helping us for sleep. Magnesium is really important for making serotonin and regulating that hormone melatonin. And the foods that are rich in magnesium are things like fish, meat, dairy, pumpkin seeds, wholemeal spinach, Brazil nuts, almonds, and flax seeds. Now, it's unlikely and it's very rare for somebody to be deficient in magnesium, but there are a lot of people who may have low levels of magnesium. So it is important to make sure you include a wide range of these foods in your diet, and again, spreading them out throughout the day. We've seen already the different foods that are rich in tryptophan, but there's also some micronutrients that are really important in making and regulating melatonin, this sleep cycle hormone. These are B6, calcium, and zinc. B6 is found in poultry, pulses, lentils, bananas, and soy. Calcium is found in dairy, tofu, fortified plant drinks, and yogurts, and zinc is found in meat, shellfish, pumpkin seeds, and sesame seeds. Also important to consider is vitamin D, which of course is extremely important for bone health. But we've also seen with recent research that it may also play a role in how well we sleep. So it's maybe important to maybe take a supplement of vitamin D, 10 micrograms a day. You definitely need this, especially for bone health, but it could also help with regards to sleep and sleep patterns too. We can get vitamin D, of course, from our diet, but it's only found in a few foods. So egg yolks, oily fish, and fortified cereals and other products. So for a lot of people, it's really difficult to get enough vitamin D through diet alone. We can also make vitamin D from the sunlight, but during the year from Halloween to St. Patrick's Day in Ireland, we can't make vitamin D from the sun. So it's really imperative to maybe take a supplement during this time. So some of the things that women experience during this time are hot flushes and night sweats. And there's a few things that can help, but again, really important to talk to your doctor, your GP about this. There could be, of course, pharmacological approaches that may be really beneficial. But we do know from research, for some women, definitely maintaining a healthy weight can help reduce the impact of hot flushes. And we've seen from other research, women who consume a Mediterranean style diet, lots of fruit and veg, lots of starchy fibrous foods, not too much meat or red meat or processed meat, and moderate amount of alcohol. These can all be quite beneficial. Phytoestrogens, which you can see here, some of the foods that are rich in phytoestrogens, these are the plant form of estrogen. So we have estrogen in the human body, plants have phytoestrogens. So basically they're a really weak form of the hormone estrogen. So for some women, eating foods that are rich in phytoestrogens could potentially help alleviate some of those symptoms, such as hot flushes and night sweats. So you're looking at things like legumes, edamame beans, tofu, anything with soy in. These can all be quite useful. Now, it does take several weeks for these foods and their effect to build up and have an effect in the body. So if you do try a diet that's rich in estrogen foods and soy foods, you mightn't see a difference for several weeks, but for some women, it can be really beneficial. We've also seen as well that CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, can also be very useful to help reduce the impact of hot flushes and night sweats, and some of the triggers that can offset hot flushes and that would be things like spicy foods, coffee, smoking, and alcohol. So maybe to watch if you do consume these foods, to see whether they could be potential triggers. So I would like to summarize by saying that, this whole period through menopause, it's very unique experience for every woman, and it's an individual experience. So it's really important that women talk, and especially talk to each other, so that they can support each other and share experiences, because that does help with a lot of the, if you know what's going on and what other women are experiencing, it does make it a lot easier. So it's important to talk around all of this. Of course, there's lots of options out there, and to be aware of that, talk to your GP. There's pharmacological and non-pharmacological approaches that can be taken. So again, there's is hopefully something that could be for you, that could help with the symptoms that you're experiencing. But also lifestyle could maybe complement those pharmacological approaches, or for some women, they might be sufficient to help alleviate some of those symptoms. So things like diet, physical activity, mindfulness, and CBT could all be part of that. And of course, at the end of the day, it's really important to be kind to yourself. There's a lot going on, and your body's been working extremely hard for you. And it's important through this time to be kind and patient with yourself. Thank you very much.